discuss a memo that's required from this committee to be sent to the Appropriations Committee regarding what our priorities are for the budget. So everybody, I've dropped on your desk a draft of a memo, and just the kind of the introductory stuff we don't have to talk about too much at the moment, at least, but certainly good to hear input from folks. The main thing I want to do is, so each committee provides a memo to the Appropriations Committee related to actually really what our person has asked us to weigh in on, our committee liaison, the person who has charge or is in charge of the budget items that are in front of this committee, that being Trevor Squirrel. And so he provided me with, here's a bunch of the requests that have been made to the Appropriations Committee, and how do we prioritize those? Now, I do understand that certain individuals don't want to vote for any of these and don't want to have any increased money, but essentially I'm trying to get from this committee understanding what the committee's priorities are, to tell them if there is going to be any more money put towards these asks, we should get a chance to weigh in. So unless, all these, none of this is the governor's recommendation. All of these things are beyond the governor's recommendation. That's what's in this. So essentially their Appropriations Committee is fine with the recommendation, at least with respect to public safety, that is, that the governor's provided, but there are additional requests, and that's really what these are. So I have taken an initial cut given various testimony, but we're going to have conversation. I want to hear where folks are with this on at least what I think the priorities are. At least the first three are from our various testimony. I think our priorities. Past the first three is really, I'm not sure. I can't read where this committee is on a lot of the other priorities there. So definitely want to get input from people on what they think should be the priority. Whether you, at this point, whether you agree with any additional spending or not. So that's kind of, I'm also planning on, maybe not today, to give people a little bit more time. I am planning on going through each of these buckets or whatever you want to call them, and probably taking a vote to see where people are on that, because almost certainly appropriations will be asking me not just, well, how supportive were there of these different items. So want to open it up for discussion. Anybody want to weigh in, or have they not had a chance to think about this yet? Ken?
It's probably in here and I don't see it, but isn't there, so I see you got diversion in here, but isn't there part of this court backlog and court, all that stuff, with sealing and with expungement too, more expungement, big time expungement, right?
I'm not
Is adding to the backlog?
Well, that's a whole different thing. I mean, the Senate Judiciary Committee had on their schedule for today, and see if they actually did vote on this. I could find out. They were going to vote on S12, which is the sealing expungement bill, which we'll take up after crossover. And I am certainly intent on getting that out. And they have, I don't know where the administration is with what they are passing out. My understanding is they've been working really hard to try to find their way to compromise. But we're going to get that. So that there's nothing in the budget request specifically related to sealing or expungement, is my understanding. That would come from the court. Well, actually, I take that back. The state's attorneys suggest that they needed that part of the reason why they are so backed up is that they have to do a lot of work on expungements. That's what the administrator said. But how I can connect that to the state's attorney's ask, I frankly can't. I don't know how one would connect expungement to the state's attorney's ask.
Would that have its own number attached to it potentially, that bill?
No, I don't think there's any money on the expungement ceiling bill, as far as I know. It wasn't out of here, when we
Right.
passed it out of here, and it's, I'm pretty sure there's, yeah.
But if I may,
Yeah.
it's still gonna cost a lot of money. And I'm,
So I think what we're trying to do with that is it's going to cut costs, not cost more. I mean, the ceiling, moving to ceiling, from what I understand from some of the testimony we received, is going to save time. And I'm very determined to do that.
if we go to ceiling,
Correct,
I believe that's what I heard too, but
right. Which we're gonna get from S12, which S12 is, but it's not reflected in the budget at all.
right, so it's still gonna be an extra cost. And then,
Not an extra cost, it's a cost that is being incurred right now.
so my biggest thing, it's going right back to what I already said, is appreciate you writing down stuff, appreciate this coming to me and all this stuff. I am still absolutely mystified why we have so many cases, so much backlog, and we're arresting the same people over and over and over again, that we're just keep creating our own problem that us as legislators are responsible for. Not law enforcement, not judges, not prosecutors. It's frustrating. From my personal view, that is one of the most frustrating things that I deal with in my mind.
Right, and I guess I'm not sure how that directly relates to the budget, other than.
It'll cost a lot of money.
Well, other than, yeah, they're asking for additional resources so they can move cases more expeditiously. That's what the intro to this memo was talking about.
Sorry to interrupt, but start enforcing the law when they come the first time. Start going and holding accountability. So maybe they don't do it time and time and time again. And then the ones that do, that might have other situations going on in their life, get them what is needed from there instead of enabling more bad habits.
Right. Understood.
Thank you.
Tom?
Is there a difference between the governor's okay and our ask? Do we know that number? Is there a number in that?
I don't know exactly what that is. And hopefully I can still get that, so adding up all of this, all of this is beyond the governor's ask, if I understand. Everything in this.
Do you know what that number is though?
I don't. I mean, I can get that from, you mean adding all this up?
Or the cost of this post
Right,
versus what he's the one to spend?
that's a good question. I mean, we could add that up, I mean, that's a lot, probably. But that's why we're giving them there's no way we're getting anything even close to what's in here.
Okay.
So I'm just, so I mean, there's that,
It'd
but.
be a starting point, I guess.
Right, yeah, right. There's no, I mean, so there's no way we're gonna, I'm sorry, Sarah Robinson, but it seems like there's no way that we're gonna get a $4.1 million contingency fund.
Yeah, I saw that. That was a little,
But
okay.
I agree that would be great and would be needed. Maybe appropriation.
Maybe a little less.
Start a contingency fund and so the other thing is that, so to be clear with Trevor, and it's not necessarily clear in here, is that, so even though we're ranking these, this doesn't mean that we don't want somebody that's our ninth rank or whatever, the way I have it numbered right now, or 7 is judiciary, and we can change those around. It doesn't mean they get nothing, and it doesn't mean that our number 4 currently, and this is not, again, I want to get everybody's viewpoint on this. I have state's attorneys for, there's no way they're getting even close to what they're asking for there. So I mean, I think the money's gonna be divvied through a lot of these, but they still want our priorities. And there's a couple ways we can do this. The way I have it here is I have 1 through 9. We could instead have, I've seen other people have like 3 tiers, like the top tier, second tier or third tier, just to let where this committee feels if there's any additional money, this is where it should go. Ian, yeah.
How did you do it last year?
So last year was a whole different, last year, unlike this year where education and housing and what else? Healthcare, no, I've heard there's another priority, but public safety was like one of the top 2 or 3 priorities. And it was like, do something about this. And we had an overall, actually 2-year plan. We took a lot of testimony and a big part of it was in fact providing resources to the criminal justice system. So we had something much like this.
Yeah.
But we ended up actually having a separate bill that went through where the money should go and actually had a place where the money was coming from. Yeah,
We created a revenue source.
right, it created the revenue and it had this list and the revenue did not last through the whole process. I think that, not surprising, but the bill was not passed all the way through, but we asked for essentially over 2 years, $16 million we thought we needed for different resources, including states attorneys, victim advocates defense, and courts, and I'm probably missing some CJCs and such. And we did get almost 8 million additional towards those things last year. And we had a second year part of the plan, but that was kind of tied to actually having this revenue first kick in, which didn't get put in. So we're in a different place this year.
Okay.
Than we had last year, and we have to be a little more, no, I wouldn't say we were circumspect last year. We really looked hard and took a lot of testimony to figure out how many additional positions each of these entities
And if
needed.
we come up with that 10% corporate tax, I will not be the only Republican voting for it this year.
I only ask because I really appreciate the ranking and doing it like this, and I just like if you had done it similarly, you could tell me, okay, appropriations kind of like took the first 4 and like or something like, so I could know where the.
So they didn't, I mean.
And it sounds like they don't do that. They kind of do all of them for some amount, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I've experienced, and that's yeah. So, I mean, I think in the past we've said they're all important. Like 2-3 years ago, I don't think we said, yeah, this is all important. Then that left for them to divvy it up among them. And I guess we could do that again this year, saying they're all important. You divvy it up, however, if you have $2 million extra, you decide how to use that. But I think that we probably should guide them a little more than that.
Yeah.
This year. So let's, I mean, why don't I ask this, that as far as if I was going to do tiers, which I'm not suggesting, I mean, in my mind, I have a top tier right now, and that's pre-charge diversion, given how many cases will otherwise be going to the courts. State transport deputies, for all the reasons we learned when we had that testimony. And then support for victims of crime, so crime victim services, the network, and state's attorneys, victim advocates. When we get to that third one, so really for number 1 and number 2, I think that we need the total amount that we have been asked for. But for number 3, I don't think it's going to be something that, even if they have the money downstairs, they're not going to be able to give it. To fully fund all these asks in number 3.
Number 2 would fund 12 deputies altogether.
They would fund 12 deputies altogether, which is my understanding from the testimony. Is one of the critical things we can do to help with the backlog. Yeah. And that's also where I find, the pre-charge diversion, that if we don't do that, we're going to be significantly adding to the backlog. So that's kind of where those two are primary for backlog. And frankly, Tim Leaders, Dumont and the other folks probably are not gonna like that I'm about to say this, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it because, I mean, they're not gonna. I like that they ask for everything that they absolutely feel they need, but that's not gonna happen. And I also really want to see how the additional resources that the courts are implementing, how much that's gonna affect the clearance rate and backlog before we start putting a lot more money into prosecutors and defenders.
So. Like you said, state's attorneys, they probably put every need that they have. And some other people did too, I'm sure. I mean, you look at support for victims of crime, I mean, they got a list and I wonder if it would make sense to have them prioritize.
And they are. I mean, my understanding is Trevor has asked them to prioritize.
Oh, okay.
So I'm kind of doing buckets at this point because I don't think I have that information and they want this memo by tomorrow. So I think right. So I think the understanding is this kind of overall is prioritization. Maybe that's why we do different tiers and even within the tier, because
So do we say to them, how's it feel to want and get it to them by the end of the week?
well, I don't know what all we're gonna.
I don't know.
As far as,
What is it you're thinking that, they don't need the state's attorney?
well, I think they probably need all of it, but it's a matter, it's that we're not gonna be able to satisfy all the needs. I don't doubt that they could use that all.
How can you complete a docket without state's attorneys, prosecutors?
Well, that's, we need that, certainly. Agreed.
Throwing that out there.
Maybe that is.
But what isn't vital to the whole system
That's a good question.
on this list? I think you could make the argument that all of it is vital to a fully functioning criminal and civil justice system. That's the pickle we're in.
I agree. See, how do we get here?
Right.
When did we spend so much money?
Or did we starve these agencies for so long?
I don't know about that. Okay.
So, yeah, Ken.
So the other thing that's not in here is, which Judge Zone won't be very happy with me right now, and neither will Terry, because I tried to reason and fight it like crazy. But part of the backlog problem, another part is that, we're paying so much money for, and it's cost a lot of money, is they wanted to take their ADS and they wanted to go on their own, which they did, and I think it's a $10 million plus price tag. Judges had to learn that. I think they're still struggling with that from what I hear. So that has also contributed to the court backlog. And going back to how did we get here and so far behind and all this other stuff, again, we haven't certainly spent the money wisely the way I think it should be, which I'm just one of many. And we haven't been fiscally responsible at all to do what's needed to be done.
So on the technology thing, my understanding from talking to judges and court personnel is that the new system is working much better than the ADS provided system. They're not having networks going down. So actually the old system was causing more problems than the new system. And I guess you work in the court and maybe I've seen that as well. That probably was a good investment. Having said that, again, yeah, I understand that looking past, you may believe that there was misspent money. I don't necessarily agree, but what I'm trying to do is figure out, all right, appropriations wants to at least know what our priorities are. That does not mean that we're going to get any of them or just parts of them, but it's like, all right, we're trying, we've taken a lot of testimony and what are the top things that we can do to help with public safety. And besides, at least within our jurisdiction. There's other things outside of our jurisdiction that could help, such as housing and treatment and all those kind of things, but that's not us. So again, if yeah.
Ian had his hand up first.
I did too.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was gonna, what if we did, 3 groups with 3 in each? Because you've got 9 priorities. And that way, we could rank within the groups, the tiers. But then you also have like another ranking, which is the tiers themselves. So if you like felt a little unsure where to put something on the 1, 2, 3, you know it's on tier 1, which gives additional sort of information to appropriations.
Right.
And then I have other thoughts about the actual where things go, but I can wait on that.
I see we've got close to $500,000 going to the Attorney General too. Did we get any sort of response from them on what they're gonna do to help out in this situation? No.
That's a good question. We have not had testimony on those additional questions. On that additional ask in number 6.
Number 6.
That just came to me this morning from Trevor, so that's new to me as well, which I suppose I can ask the Attorney General to send somebody to tell us what that's all about.
Well, yeah, I mean,
We can just keep it in our bottom tier because we don't know what it's all about. It's kind of where I would be.
But you're talking about the other issue with are you talking about the criminal division? Tom, is that?
I'm talking in general, the Attorney General's office.
Number 6, you're looking.
They want to add people for other types of prosecution. But we've got plenty of prosecution to do. It looks like big tech, Assistant Attorney General, appellate unit, home improvement.
So
Yeah. Out of the Attorney General's office. I mean,
That is one of the things that the state's attorney.
wouldn't it be better?
Is that in response to that?
So can I just throw out there as a possibility then, as far as the tiered system, that the first 3, whatever, and I like the order personally myself, we have the first 3, but tier 1. Tier 2 is in fact what we have down as 4, 5, and 6. No, I'm sorry, 4, 5, and 7. Although I don't know which one ranks higher in that tier, frankly. And then the 3rd tier is.
I do.
6. Well, good, I'd love to know.
I think
It's 6, 8, and 9, even though I think that access to civil justice is extremely important. I think that legal aid is extremely important as well. Our kind of the top priority we're supposed to be dealing with now is public safety and getting the courts functioning on the criminal side. So that doesn't mean that I don't think that Vermont legal aid absolutely should get some part of what the request is, but that's me. But, yeah, Tom.
I don't know which one, to me, whatever one works on the backlog the most, and I'm not sure which, and I know they will all potentially subtract from the backlog at some level. I'm not sure which one would subtract the most from the backlog. And I guess, I know it's a way of doing it, putting things into, a tiered system, I guess, which ones we think are the most important. But if we put, and I'll just say the first 3 is the first tier, they all aren't gonna get fully funded.
No.
No matter what.
Right.
So a saying that I've used all my life is half measures availed us nothing. So it makes me wonder if we take the most important item from these nine items that we have and fund it completely. And does that get us closer, you know, to where we want to go as far as getting the backlog down? If we started that 5 years ago, we'd be in pretty good shape.
So, yes, I completely agree with that. And as far as from the testimony and kind of where we are now, I think, again, that the pre-charge diversion, because we know numbers and we know numbers and the impact if we don't fund it, which is probably over 600 cases, either not being charged, which means no accountability, or going to the courts. That's kind of one. And the transport deputies, I think we've definitely heard good testimony that we
Yeah.
need to get those there. So I think those two are the most obvious. Because, yeah, the state's attorneys, I agree that state's attorneys, defense counsel, really critical, but I also kind of want to see how much was it their resources as opposed to the court's resources that it has caused, you know, that's been the main block. And we've given the courts all those resources, and now they finally, just now, in the last probably couple of weeks, the new judges have come on board. Let's kind of see where that goes before we start putting a lot more money into state's attorneys and defense counsel. I mean, I still think they should get some of that.
I just don't want to divvy the money up just so we can appease somebody and say, hey, we gave you some money.
Understood, yes.
And not have it going to have maximum effect.
Right.
Again, I think taking whatever the number one issue is on here and funding it fully is potentially the maximum effect we're gonna get for our money. Potentially.
I think that's,
And then we do it again next year with it. And so
So-
the next year, and then, you know, the next thing you know, we're, like I said, if we started it 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be in pretty good shape with all this
I
stuff.
don't think so. Well, other than that dang COVID. So Barbara.
No, that's what I'm talking, is all this started because of COVID, most of it.
Barbara.
Thanks. So I'm wondering if rather than having the tiers be arbitrarily assigned, can we have some parameters as to what justifies what tier? Like if we can answer what will happen if this isn't funded, what will be worse than now? What will happen if you get the money? What will be better that you can guarantee will happen as a result of getting the funding? Because, yeah, what will be better for Vermonters? What will be worse for Vermonters? Like, and that way we're not like, oh, I think this is 2, or I think, so that we can say, these are the things that are going to get worse as far as public safety, or, you know, people being not able to get to work and function as a result of not being able to get their day in court, or like, so that we're really trying to be as objective as possible.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that that's kind of partly there already. And I guess the first 3, the first 2 are directly related to moving cases. Getting cases to have consequences, diverting some from the courts in the first one, pre-charge diversion, and getting cases probably resolved more expeditiously by having more people brought to court instead of the remote hearings, which are causing a lot of issues. The third one is a little different. The third one is for victims of crime and victims of domestic and sexual violence. That's somewhat of a different issue, but it's really kind of a critical thing that we've heard a lot this session about that. And if we don't provide some of the funds there, you know, victims are not going to get their services and support. So,
Right.
but past there, it's a little cloudier for me as far as exactly what's going to happen if the defender and the judiciary and the prosecutors don't get everything or don't get their additional requests. It's cloudier to me as far as what the impact is going to be if they don't get that. Because I look at the fact that, you know, part of what the state's attorney's presentation to us was how many cases they in fact reduced. They actually took care of a lot of cases. We're moving in the right direction. How much the additional resources are going to help with that, or if we don't get those resources to them, it's not clear. Doesn't mean that it's absolutely needed. It's just a little cloudier for me as far as what we get out of that.
So it may be that we're prepared to do tier one and that we say we're happy to divide tier two and tier three if there's money left. But at this point, we're putting forward our tier one priorities.
I mean, if the committee wants, if that's where the committee is, I'm fine with that as well, but, Karen.
A couple of things. So I can support the tiers if we go that route. I also just want to we put out our recommendations, but then appropriations is also looking at it and going to decide what to do. So just if we were to pick to fully fund one, they could say, thank you for that recommendation, but we're doing X, Y, Z. So I just want to give them as many resources and tools as we can. And then I wonder for some of these that are more expansive, if we want to prioritize within each one. So one that comes to mind is like with 3, when it talks about victims of crime. Again, I think we can all say like all of these things are important, but like establishing a contingency fund, nothing against the Vermont network, but like that is money that is in contingent. Like, do we want that, or would we rather that money go to actual things for? So I just don't know if we want to, especially with like 3 or these other ones, just leave it open-ended. So we want to say within each category, these are the priorities, or if you need to cut something, this is where we would recommend cutting. Like for me, I think a contingency fund would be the one. Not that I don't agree that it's a good idea, but if we have other parts of our judiciary system asking for money that they can use right now, I would want to allocate that.
Correct. Makes sense. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I think I'm in agreement with all 3 in tier 1. I hear the point on the contingency fund, and I'd be probably discussing that, maybe changing around how we talk about that particular issue. But I just want to say, I think that you could talk about supporting victims of crimes as a backlog issue, because we heard a lot of testimony about the fact that the victim services are one of the only elements of the criminal justice system right now that is responsive immediately. And that's a really critical issue with the backlog, because you've got people waiting for a system that's taking forever. And these are some of the programs that actually can respond to a victim immediately, and they can feel some actual accountability, if not accountability, at least some response from their judicial system.
To include the
So-
state's attorney's advocates as well.
Yeah, which are part of number 3. Down on page 6 here. So I think, I know it's like a little bit of massaging of it, but I think it is part of the backlog issue too.
I'm just a little confused on how dealing with the victims reducing the backlog.
It doesn't reduce the backlog, but I guess you would have to change it a little bit, but I think that part of the issue with the backlog, besides it being bad for defendants and bad for the judicial system, it's also bad for victims.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the issue with the backlog is that victims aren't seeing an adjudication in an actual response to a crime. But the victim services are able to step in right away. We heard testimony that they step in right away and they're able to provide services to victims before there's an adjudication, but they're not funded enough. And so if we're talking about ways to make sure that both we're addressing the backlog, but that we're also serving victims while the backlog exists, because we've also heard the backlog's going to take years to solve, then I think that victim services is an important part of it.
Okay.
I agree. I second.
And Chair, can you remind us on the timeline for this?
More, okay, great.
So, so I'm still suggesting that we have the numbers as we have them right now, though I would drop Office of the Attorney General to number 9, actually, because we don't. Sorry.
Can I ask a question about what Ian just said? I'm like processing it and thinking, is it possible as well that the work of the state's attorneys, victim liaisons, my term, theirs, might actually hasten the pace, that in talking to a victim or victims, you might not need the court.
I can tell you that I have worked with one of the witnesses that we spoke with, who's a victims advocate out of one of the state attorney's offices, and her work helped to move the case along and resolve it.
They triage very
Yes.
much so and push for things that need.
Right.
Yeah,
So in
resolution.
that way, I think it directly impacts the backlog.
I don't.
I mean, it's
so
still
you
being
can do.
processed, but in a shorter, potentially a shorter, less court time intensive way, ultimately for some cases. Is that fair?
I think that I think that reflects testimony that we heard.
The one thing that I see in here that really sort of is exasperating to me is having 100 homicides that are undone. That those are, the type of cases that suck the lifeblood out of the judiciary. There's so many hearings that are just hearing after hearing after hearing, evidentiary, depositions, all kinds of stuff. And if we can't get people to do that because they're overworked, I don't know what's going to go on with it. And we have obligations to process them in a certain amount of time. At least getting them to a resolution would be great. I think also, I wish you could take like a budget draft of some sort and also combine it with the intent of the legislature to be, all right, we want the judges to take advantage of keeping the public happy the way they're requesting, stop this turnover at the courthouses and hold some people accountable for now as best we can. And, maybe use Rule 48. Let's clear some of this stuff in certain places where it's just taking up space and include that. You know what I mean? More of a plan, I guess. I know what we intend, but we got to make them know it, I guess.
I mean, in last year, in our budget memo, we actually had a paragraph explaining all the things that the court was doing to try to address the backlog as well. It's not in here. I haven't heard the same testimony this year. But yeah, I mean, I agree with that concept, definitely. Is that what we put in the budget memo? And I'm not sure what.
I don't know, but 100 homicides is just, I mean, judiciary, I think, has got probably the judges for it, but the other entities,
I mean,
so the state's attorney, the defense attorney, and things like that, that's a lot.
But I think that what we have from the state's attorneys right now is if there's no lever in their request that takes care of that, as far as I can tell. From what
Well,
we
just extra help, right? I don't know. I'm not at liberty to say what they need and don't need.
Yeah, so I mean,
They definitely need help.
so I think the 4 deputy state's attorneys are actually ones that we approved last year that they just haven't filled, and that they want to convert to permanent positions. That's where that one comes from, the deputies.
They've got 4 part-timers they want to convert to full-time.
I think they just haven't filled those positions, period. They have, I think, 10 positions that they want to convert to permanent positions. But there's 4 that they haven't even filled, is my understanding. That's what those 4 deputy state's attorneys are. So that part I don't fully understand, but they're not actually asking for more than we already approved last year, but they want them to be permanent. And those 4 deputy state's attorneys they're spread, they're in places where I don't even know if they have a murder that they're fall behind. So it's like, do the paralegals and administrative support staff, is that what's going to help us with processing those felonies? Or the docket manager from what I understood of the testimony is to really try to clear out some of the old cases, to sit down and really find the cases that could be dismissed. Fiscal support staff, field support staff, I don't recall exactly what they said about that one, except, the main ones that can help are the paralegals and the administrative support staff.
But also the per diem people. I mean, that's the other reason why they're not. But yeah, is the jobs are over in June. I mean, it's kind of hard to hire somebody for something if it's gonna expire. If it was permanent with a pension and all that wonderful stuff that go along with it, then
Well, they filled 6 of the 10 as limited service. I'm leaving, I haven't suggested we weigh in one way or another on that one. So are you suggesting that at least when you get to the state's attorneys, that perhaps the paralegals and administrative support staff are priorities? So long as they go to where the murders are being prosecuted?
I think that would be a better question for them, but
Right. Yeah, okay.
We're not gonna put language in there that says that they must be directed to where,
right.
Yeah.
because I feel like, not that we're incentivized, but I feel like that's like, okay, so you have these types of crimes, then you get more staff, and so they could be upcharging things, or I just don't want us to go down that road.
I don't think they want us to go down.
Okay.
No, I think they want to figure out where their needs are greatest. Well, I don't, yeah, Angela.
I just, again, going back to the victim services, and Tom made me think of this when you mentioned legislative intent. I think it's particularly noteworthy that some of the shortfalls in funding for the network and Crime Center, Center for Crime Victim Services are due to legislative action and like well-intended positive changes that we've made here, policy choices that we've made, but still our choices nonetheless. And so it seems to me just the right thing to do to balance that out as best we can. If we're going to take money away from a fund that we have set up, and we should be replacing it, because we still expect and we still rely on these organizations to provide the same level of service. But we've not provided them with the funding they need to do that, and we've taken away funding in essence through some of the legislative changes we've made. So I know you've mentioned a number of times keeping that in the top tier, and I'm just expressing strong support for that proposal.
Yeah.
Did we hear any testimony? I don't think we did, but did we hear any testimony from the state's attorneys about like prioritizing their kind of big list?
We did, but I don't think they fully went through it. They, if I'm recalling right, victims advocates is what Annie said first, but I'm not gonna worry about that. So I can find out from Trevor, who did sit down with them today to understand their priorities. So, and he was going to get me that, and I haven't seen it yet.
If I recall her, he said that the support staff was critical.
Yeah, I think I think it was victims and support staff were the two things she mentioned, but I don't think we got like the full priority list. Somehow that got lost in the conversation, but yeah, Karen.
I just wondering with the state's attorney, I don't think we asked this, I don't know if we did on some of these others as well. None of this was included in the governor's recommend.
Yeah, I made that clear earlier when you were.
When I wasn't here, okay, so and we didn't get any rationale why it wasn't included. I just know that public safety was highlighted as the main issue, so I'm curious of why it isn't prioritized in the budget.
I didn't. Wrong person asked.
Okay, I just know we took testimony, you heard that.
I could probably
Ken can tell us.
make an assumption
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
Spend the money wisely. I mean, we should be looking at cuts.
Well,
I mean, affordability was clearly out there. When everybody got elected or reelected, whatever you want to say. And we're doing nothing but making everything more expensive, even still.
so the testimony we've gotten over the last 2 years, not long, probably longer, is that we've under-resourced the criminal justice system for a while. Things got really bad during COVID. And one of the ways that we could, we understand the number of cases per state's attorney is much higher than it should be. And that slows things down. The court didn't have enough judges or staff to move cases. So yeah, we can cut, but then we just have to accept that we're not going to have consequences, closer to crimes. I know we're working on trying to get the courts in a position and prosecutors in a position to have consequences and hopefully more quickly for repeat offenders. And we keep on bringing that up. And I absolutely agree. And we've talked to Judge Zone about this frequently and we've asked, well, what kind of additional tools do you need? And we tried to give them with the retail theft last year. I'm going to be looking at bail revocation probably the week that we get back. We're looking for tools to help there. But what we understood from all the testimony that we've gotten the last couple of years, I didn't make up, is that what they need is more prosecutors, defenders, court staff, and judges to move cases. And that, yes, that costs money. And victims advocates are having huge caseloads and are not giving victims the full service that they need. There's really big threats with regards to the victim services that Victim Services Center and the network provides because of a continuing reduction in the amount of money that they've been given in real terms. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose we can. I think this committee's our charge is to try to make public safety, improve public safety. And this committee, all the testimony you've heard is that one of the main things you can do is provide the resources to the different entities within, that's our, appropriations, I guess, and the governor with his veto power or the negotiations that are going to happen can decide that, no, that's not that important. We're not going to give any of that money to what this committee feels is necessary to deal with public safety.
So again, we can disagree, like we'll respectfully disagree with each other and still get along. And how you're looking at it is completely differently than how I look at it. I mean, I've never heard victims mentioned so much as what I just heard. And then on top of it, it's still our big backlog, a majority of it is lack of accountability and holding people accountable for their bad actions that keep coming in. And I'm just going to use the big one that continues up in Chittenden County of, he must be going on 1900 by now. And we keep allowing it. And we're not doing anything we're certainly not protecting victims by letting people like that out. And many others that I'm dealing with or I'm certainly hear about locally right here in Washington County. So I want to help people. But I want to be fiscally responsible and I want to be doing things that need to be done. When people come to me with wants and Christmas lists and all this stuff, it's like, I want to get back to the bare basics and figure out what's really needed and people being held accountable.
So the people that are being released are showing up and, so they are not a flight risk, presumably. So they're not being held on bail. They are property crimes that, that they can't be held. Yeah, there are certainly instances where people that I think probably should be held, they should find a way to hold them. They don't. But one of the ways to move this along is to get cases processed a little more expeditiously, get cases moving through so that they can, so they don't have to spend all their time on the murders, the attempted murders, the sexual assaults, the domestic violence, which, yeah, frankly, probably should take priority over these retail thefts, these nuisance crimes. But yeah, those nuisance crimes need to be dealt with as well. And we keep on telling the Judge Zone to pay attention to that. And I think he has been, but in any event, Karen, then Tom.
Yes, I just wanted to reinforce a statement that you had said, Chair, of that our job is to really make the recommendations of what is going to serve the criminal justice system the best. And so I just feel that we owe it to do that. And then it's appropriations job to then take that information and include the recommendations as they can. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to add new money to it. It could be taking from some other savings that they found somewhere else to do this. They have that big picture that we don't have. We just have the picture of the criminal justice system, and we need to say, these are the things that are important. Here you go, appropriations. As you manage the budget, find gaps and holes, and these are the things to consider funding. And I just think that's important for us, like to not do the appropriations job or assume what they're going to do and just give them the recommendations.
And
Just going off what Representative Golson said, I've been talking to a lot of the players in the judiciary, at least in the Chittenden County circuit, and they're starting to make a little bit of headway. I think there's getting to be a little bit more compliance as far as compliance. I should say a little bit more going on as far as what I would expect to see. Like our big players that are always in trouble or not in trouble right now because they're incarcerated, and they probably look better than they have all year and feeling better. I don't know how they're going to be when they come back out, but hopefully good. That's why we need other things for them, obviously, to take care of them. But I think us speaking up and being in session is helping. We can't let up.
right. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And it's helpful that they have now their third criminal judge. They had two. They were down 33.3%. And that definitely was having a big impact in Chittenden County as well. And hopefully they're also using the tools that we gave them last year with respect to bail, that they can actually be holding people on bail. That before last year, I think Act 135, maybe, I don't remember. Angela?
I just have a question, I guess, about, or maybe a different viewpoint than what was just expressed by Representative Goflant, that I don't think this is the first time we're hearing about victims. Not even close. And it really bothers me, it bothers me that when we have people testifying about what they need, such as Jennifer Pullman, that we'll hear all kinds of support for the work they do. And gosh, it's horrible that you're having to scrape together however many grants, manage dozens and dozens of grants just to scrape by to serve
Is
victims.
this an attack on another member of the committee? It kind of sounds that way.
But this committee member is going to respond, so let her go, let it go.
Not saying it is, it just kind of sounds that way to me.
State it without the person's name.
Oh, Tom just said his name, so was that an attack? Or
I just asked a question.
Yeah.
what are you asking me?
I asked the chair.
I didn't see it as an attack. So.
Okay. I'm good then.
So go ahead.
I'm saying we can't have it both ways. We can't say that we understand. I mean, for all of us, we can't have it both ways where we say we understand what you're saying and we so value your work. And then when it comes time to fund that work, we say it's not that. No one is saying it's not important, but as we're talking about ranking, it's concerning to me to hear anything that hints at I guess, a different take in the moments when, you know, people who do the work aren't sitting before us telling us what they need.
Yeah, no, I think we need to put our money where the urgency is and where we've heard, testimony, of the needs, and we've supported what individuals are saying to us, but we have to back it up with funding. So, Ken.
I believe what I said very clearly. It's my belief. And I've also very clearly stated, I've never heard the victims part be mentioned as many times as I did today. I believe that's what I said. That's what I meant. And I also said, I believe very clearly the money needs to be spent wisely. And it should have been spent wisely for many years, and it wasn't. And we can keep going back to these lack of judges, and we can keep going back to judicial nominating board not meeting and the governor not getting his stuff done and all this stuff. We also had a judge retention that just said the hell with it, and he wasn't coming back. So we can agree to disagree, and hopefully we can walk out of this room and we're still cordial and friendly with each other and whatever. But honestly, I don't see where we're amounting to anything with this right now, because I think all of us have got our heels dug in with it.
Well,
And I don't think we're doing anything that
so I
my belief
just have to ask you one follow-up question actually on that is I'd like to understand where, on what you're basing, and you have basis, what you're basing that money has been unwisely spent in the realm of what we deal with.
oh my God, this is a state house. It's
No, I'm talking, we don't have anything. Okay. I'm talking the criminal justice system. I'm talking about the courts, the prosecutors, the victim advocates, the network. Where are we misspending that money?
I didn't say,
Well, that's what I'm hearing. because
didn't
this
say
is the realm
network.
We're looking at,
I didn't say network.
but you just, I mean, well,
I
the
said
network,
the judicial system, not holding people accountable.
Okay. Understand. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Zach.
I have a separate concern and just question. No, sorry, I heard the zip. I wasn't sure if someone was saying something. No, that's okay. I thought someone was saying something. Just a question in terms of the Attorney General's ask and requested recommendations here. I think there are a number of things that are outstanding in terms of the testimony that we received last week from the Attorney General's office that I know that I haven't received directly. I don't know if other members of the committee have received answers to some of the testimony. But I think that's a pretty large outstanding item that we want answers on.
So,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, I did mention this. I was gonna drop the Attorney General to number 9, but I'm actually thinking of, we're just not gonna include it in our recommendation one way or another, because we don't have the information to
I
provide.
think that's fair.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, I think so we've agreed on one thing.
Yeah. Isn't that nice compromise?
Wow.
Yeah, a couple of weeks, man, I have this baby done. Yeah, I'm sorry, I walked in mid-conversation. I heard you dropping it to 9. I just want it on the record.
No, that's it, yeah, let's, I mean, we don't have enough information to weigh in on that one way or
Yeah.
another.
Yeah, and just to stay on that, I think they were gonna get back to us on some questions I was looking for numbers or something like that, and I don't think we've still got those.
And we should still get those, but I don't think we need it for the memo, because let's just.
No, I'm just bringing that up as.
So, all right, so does anybody have any view on, I mean, can I ask folks where they kind of just generally are as far as the priorities? Again, nobody has to vote for any of this stuff when it comes to the budget. We're just being asked to give priorities. Pre-charge diversion, state transport deputy sheriffs. Are people fine with having that number 1 and number 2?
We do a number 2.
All right. So where do you want number 1?
It's a charity, that's number 1.
Yeah, I guess I
know it's not gonna happen, but.
well, no, it's just if it was clear enough. If it was clear enough on exactly what won't happen if they don't get all that resource and what will if they do. That's
with any of these, with any of
Well-
these, if everybody doesn't get all their resources, what we want to happen isn't going to happen. I mean, it doesn't matter, I mean, every one of these 9 have a piece of, of the judiciary system and, and they all do good work. And, there's certainly positive things in everything as far as the criminal justice system goes, whether it's helping, victims or putting frequent flyers, in jail, like Tom said, is get you in jail up in Burlington. I just look at it as if we underfund any of it, how much good is it gonna do? And everything's gonna be underfunded. Most of it isn't gonna get anything. And, what little money there is, if we give them 3 priority and they're just gonna underfund, our top 3. So it doesn't, and no matter what they are. That's just the times we're in right now. They don't have the money.
Right.
I mean, how far could we go if we fully funded all of this? But we're not in a perfect world, so.
No.
So no matter what comes out of this, I'm not gonna support it. Not that I don't support the programs, but I can't support half measures, which is going to happen. So.
Right, no, understood. Karen.
So just to pitch for pre-charge, I do think there is an exception of it in some ways because it is clear on the numbers that would impact. It's 600 and I forget what's it in here. It's 698 cases is the 3-year average that would no longer have an outlet to be diverted from the criminal justice system. So they would go to the criminal justice system and would actually add to our current situation. And there is no other alternative to pick up pre-charge because this is allowing it to exist. So with like the other ones, it's adding on to it. The other thing I just would say is if it's really hard to work through this, if we're hearing that some people are like, I'm not going to agree to this no matter what, then I feel like, well, what are we working to compromise for? So I just want to put that out there that if we are trying to find a way to work forward on this, like, let's do it. Otherwise, we can just vote and just, it is what it is.
I think we should sit it down and see how it comes back.
Well, that's the idea, but I guess I've gotten rid of the Attorney General. I know that other folks have to leave. And we have other priorities and such. Generally, where are we as far as if I get rid of that one, where are people? I know some people can't support this at all, but as far as the list of priorities that I have, once we get rid of the Office of the Attorney General from there, where are people with this? Are you good with this?
I can say I would support with taking the Attorney General out. People probably don't want to hear from me, but that's me.
Yeah, no, that's
You know what? If the Attorney General is taken out, I support just sending it to appropriations as is in this order and then letting them see what they can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, just for the sake of conversation, I think I would agree with what the vice chair said and state's attorneys, we've received so much testimony on this. And it's such a concern. Going back to my home district over the weekend and as we're coming into town meeting, it's very hard for me to reconcile that that's the 4th priority in this draft. If it's not going to be number 1, at the bare minimum, it has to be number 2.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
At the bare minimum.
Number 4, or being number 4 or number 3. So again, I will go back to my rationale for number 4 is it's not clear enough that how that's going to impact things. I think it's clear how the other things will impact how victims are being treated and then the backlog. I think the clearest that we have, frankly, are the first 2 and the state transport deputies, the testimony that we've heard it should be right up there as well.
The other thing that I would say there is in terms of the scale and scope of impact, that the work that the state's attorneys are doing impacts all 14 counties, all Vermonters. And not to diminish the great work that other groups are doing, but this is something that they are the front lines of defense on what is a real concern for so many of our constituents, all of our constituents across the state. That it just is really, it is concerning to me, that it's not further up in our priorities as reflective of, I mean, certainly one side of the committee. And I get that maybe there's not this, scientific or quantitative justification that you're seeking. But I do think that the scale and scope and impact of the work that our state's attorneys are doing on a daily basis is not limited, just to victims, but to protecting communities.
Yeah, don't disagree.
So
You said, I mean,
I just want to state it for the record.
Yep. We'll put this down. Where are you, Alicia, if you want to weigh in?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I would, if we were moving things around, then I guess I would put, state's attorneys, before diversion, but definitely keeping, transport high on the list as well.
Ian, where?
I guess for compromise, I thought I would have, well, so the victims advocates comes from the state's attorney's request. So we pulled something out of the state's attorney's request and we put it in number 2. And as are the transport. So we have elements of the state's attorney's requests in our top 2 and 3 priorities. So one compromise may be if we could hear from the state's attorney's office about the rest of their things, if there are other rest of their requests, if they could sort of prioritize that, and maybe we could move another 1 or 2 up into one of the other categories. Hearing your point, I think we pulled from I really take to heart Martin's point that we heard from Zone A, which was that Judge Zone A, that we haven't really seen the impact of all the judges that we funded. They only just got trained and they're only just starting up. And so I really would like to see what happens with the backlog based on that. The other things that we heard from the state's attorney's office that the victim advocates have 1,000 cases each. And so we put that in priority 2. And I think that's really critical. As far as the other ones, it's a little less clear, but maybe we could clarify it. I know we need to get this done tomorrow. So
Yeah, we'll get some clarification.
yeah. So I think then to answer your question, I'm supportive of where it's at, but if we heard some testimony that we need to pull another 1 or 2 of the line items from the state's attorneys up, I would be interested in hearing from that.
So maybe it needs to be a little more fine tuning as far as, maybe there's parts of number 3 as far as the support for victims of crimes that are more of a priority there. And then certain parts of the state's attorney's request are more of a priority. And, dropping some of the, parts within these requests down. Maybe that just helps as far as, that kind of fine tuning.
Is that getting too like line item-y for
No,
this sort of
not
request?
necessarily.
Can I can support that. And I think the other thing that I have a hard time with is us changing all of it, and ultimately half of our committee is still not going to support it. So I just want to put that out there of if we're accommodating, but ultimately there's not going to be support to it. So we're doing it for the right reasons.
Right. I am definitely trying to accommodate and then understanding that I'm not going to agree with everybody. And I'll put something out for vote and see where we land and be on a straw poll. And if, so, yeah.
By the way, I appreciate that. I've always appreciated that out of you. You've always tried to get the committee to come to some sort of compromise, agreement, or whatever. Just my opinion.
Yeah.
We're
You just sometimes can't.
Yeah, we're just way off on this, from what I heard, but I could be wrong on that.
No, I think you're right, that we're a bit off of that. So
Did you really disagree with me?
once a week at least.
I also think there's a lot of waste in the state government, but this is not where it's at.
what's that?
That this is where it's at. I think that it's not, this isn't wasteful money.
Yeah, I don't think, right.
It's not.
Right.
We could better, if I may, in my mind, we could better utilize that money that's being spent there. We could be spending it much more wisely.
Just saying,
to
if we were
help.
gonna, yeah. if we were
Right,
gonna
and
put
not-
money, I could see a lot more other areas.
We don't have the Patrick Leahy money coming in that we once did. And God knows what's coming in now for federal money.
So if it's not clear to Judge Zone, and if he ever listens to this or to the prosecutors and such, is that we want that money used for addressing some of the repeat offenders.
Well, he already knows that, doesn't he?
We tried to make that pretty clear to him.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if that's not clear.
So, all right, so we'll adjourn and try to figure out a version that can be voted on.